street. Turn to your right.
I've been involved in writing a couple of books about civil liberties in the UK, which had kind of got me into. And I wasn't far from human rights issues, I suppose. And I just became. I was looking for new work to do, and I became incredibly frustrated that it was possible that the United States government could have been holding people for, at that point, 4 years without even telling the world who they had there. And I wanted to find out who they had there. And so I started trying to do some research, and there wasn't that much information available. I read Mozambique's autobiography, and he was held in Bagram for a year, and then he was held in solitary confinement in Guantanamo for 600 days. And his story was mainly of his exchanges with the guards, because he rarely saw the other prisoners. So that made me even more determined to find out, well, who are these people? And actually what happened was that this lawsuit that was passed, this lawsuit that was won by the media to force the Pentagon to release information coincided.
Peace was an amicus party to that.
Well, that coincided with me really wanting to go for it full time, and it all came together. So suddenly, here's the names and nationalities of all the prisoners, 8,000 pages of documents, and I went through it, and I thought, well, somebody else must be doing this. You know, the Washington Post, the New York Times, somebody.
Not like you did.
And it turned out that nobody was. So that's how I ended up being the custodian of the prisoners' stories in some way.
What do we want?
Justice!
When do we want it?
Now! Justice!
Now! Justice!
Thank you very much. I've never been here on the Hill before, so this is quite an amazing experience for me to be here. Hello everybody, I just want to say how amazing it is to see so many young people here. It really is. One of the things that seems to have happened over the last year or so has been this awakening of people's interest and understanding of what's wrong with the world. It's absolutely brilliant to see so many young people here. So here we are on this terrible anniversary. It really is an absolute disgrace that we have to be here. That it is 10 years today that the first prisoners arrived at Guantanamo, and where we are with these great institutions is very significant today as well, because these are places that have failed, that are responsible for part of the failure of what's happened. And we actually passed a very interesting building on the way here. We're standing in front of the Supreme Court. We passed where the D.C. Circuit Court is, and those are the judges at the moment that are holding the decisions about detainee policy in their hands. These are the people who have gutted habeas corpus of all meaning when it comes to the Guantanamo prisoners, and we need to be asking these people behind us to take on some of the cases that are making its way towards them, to say it's up to you to decide how to close Guantanamo, how to restore meaning to habeas corpus. This is the Great Writ. It's nearly 800 years old, when the barons of England forced King John to sign Magna Carta in 1215. So we're 3 years away from its 800th anniversary. The right not to be held in arbitrary indefinite detention by anybody, by the monarch it was initially, but the right not to be held without having had a fair trial. And we're looking at that position that the men in Guantanamo are still in. These are men who are all stuck facing indefinite detention without charge or trial, unless we can find a way to make that change in the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. I fought this fight for habeas corpus and for fairness for the people down there because I believe in America. And I believe it's in American principles. We're not here some radical left-wing people. We're really pushing for American values. I hate to quote him again, but Ronald Reagan said that our greatest strength in the world is not our wealth or our power, but our ideals. Our ideals of freedom and justice and the rule of law. Guantanamo violates those ideals. It hurts us every day it remains open, and it should be closed immediately.
These kinds of battles for social change, to right the wrongs and to correct the path that this government has gone on doesn't just happen in the courts. The courts are an important part of it, but it also happens in the streets. It's the people like you that come out, that are sacrificing and thinking of the men that are in detention as you are out here, as we're out here on this cold and rainy day. This is what change is about. This is why we sent this message to President Obama. This is why we're sending the message to the Congress, and this is why we're sending the message to the Supreme Court.
What I'll take back to Guantanamo on my next trip to our last client, Ben Saya Belkacem, who will be there 10 years on January 20th, is an answer to the question he always asks me, which is, does anybody care? Does anybody notice what's happening to us? Why am I still here when so many others have gone? Why don't your courts speak out? Why doesn't your Congress speak out? This is all very confusing. I don't understand how this could happen. And believe me, it's almost impossible to explain it to him, and I've been in this case since 2004. What I can take back to him now is the passion and commitment of all of you, and that means hope for him, and that's something tangible and meaningful. So I want to say on behalf of him and the other men in Guantanamo, thank you so much for coming out today in this cold rain and showing that you care. Now let's multiply your passion from here around the country. Join peace groups in your own community, speak out on this issue, and be there for the men in Guantanamo who have no other advocates.
Today has been one of the most moving days that I've had since returning from Gitmo, because down there I saw men in orange jumpsuits every day, and it was a place filled with hatred, a place filled with terror for people on both sides. And yet today, there was a level of personalization and humanization that was completely absent in Guantanamo Bay. The reason that that place can continue to work is because when I was there, we didn't know people by names. We didn't see them as people. We were taught and ingrained in us not to. They had numbers, or they even, if numbers became too personal, then you referred to them by the cell that they were in. And sometimes they changed cells, so then the face wasn't even associated with anything. Constantly changing, constantly dehumanizing the people that were there. Today what you've done, you've put a face. I see people's faces, faces that I saw when I was there. I see people called out by name, appreciated as individuals, recognized as members of families. Thank you for coming out here today. This is far and away the most people I've ever seen care about the men that are down there as people. Thank you.
I think it's very hard to imagine the entire prison closing given all the obstacles that have been placed. At the moment, we're in such a terrible position on this 10th anniversary that it's hard to get even one person out of the prison. And the first thing that we have to do is start the process of people leaving the prison again. That's a sign of how much the President, Congress and the judiciary have all failed over the last few years, is that no one's leaving. If we can do that and start that process, eventually we must get to that point, but it's not something that looks very possible at the moment.
Do you think Bush and Cheney and Obama should be brought up on war crimes?
Well, you know, for Guantanamo, Bush and Cheney, yeah. If Obama has things to answer for, it will be for different things. The assassination of U.S. citizens without due process, different issues, I think.
And as far as torture goes, do you think this country's always been involved in one way or another in torture? But it's just more out in the open now?
Against torture. We've been doing this for a few years now.
Yes and no. You know, there's always dark stuff going on. I think the Bush administration made it very public, made it almost like official policy. I think it's extremely damaging to the United States that the torture nation that was created by Bush and Cheney has not been thoroughly repudiated, that no one has been held accountable. It's like a virus. It's infected the country. It makes people think that it's acceptable to endorse the use of torture.
How do people in Great Britain feel about the subject?
Well, you know, that my fellow citizens have many failings, but at least when it comes to torture, there were more of them prepared to understand that that's a line that you don't ever cross. I think it helps that there are so many young people here, actually. I really do. You know, I think they're starting to join the dots about all the things that are wrong, and this is part of something bigger.